just recently I was surfing through various Facebook posts when I came across this that just shows us the conspiracy theories about Dr. Fauci are still alive and well and living on social media. Dr. Fauci is probably one of the most respected scientists on the planet, unless you are part of the MAGA lunatic fringe who just seriously enjoys hating on this man. They refuse to let go of this idea that Dr. Fauci was responsible for creating the coronavirus in a lab in Wuhan, China. And it appears their sole basis for believing this is that, wait for it, because Senator Rand Paul said so, so of course it must be true. So I took it upon myself to do a little research on this, and here's what I came up with. This whole Donnybrook stems from a congressional hearing which basically turned into a bit of a catfight between the two. Okay, so here's a transcript of the interaction between Dr. Fauci and Senator Paul, which caused all the fuss and all the headlines for a couple of days because it was so contentious. It was during a congressional hearing in May of 2021, I believe, where they were discussing gain-of-function research and its dangers, etc. And we'll get to the arguments that Senator Paul makes, which is just that the coronavirus was created to infect humans in a lab in Wuhan, China, he claims was funded through the National Institutes of Health. And you'll notice he keeps mentioning the name of Dr. Baric, which we'll get into that. So here Senator Paul gets into all his dramatics, saying, can you imagine if a SARS virus that's juiced up and had viral proteins added to it, to the spike protein, if that were released accidentally? Oh my God. Here he mentions Dr. Baric again, and also here he mentions the Cambridge Working Group, and a letter a bunch of scientists wrote, which is actually total bullshit. So we'll discuss that. So Paul just keeps up with all these accusations while Dr. Fauci tries to defend himself. Here, Paul mentions EcoHealth, which we'll get into later. Paul just continues the accusations and grandstanding like the little diva he is. He mentions Dr. Baric again. He keeps mentioning that name like it's a thing, and as it turns out, it really isn't. Okay, blah, 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 blah. He really needs an orchestra in the background. They're fussing words, they're fussing words. Let's just cut to the chase here. This whole debate is about where COVID came from, or what was the actual cause of COVID. Rand Paul seems to think he's the only one in the world who really cares where COVID came from and how it started. Well, that's just one of many things that Senator Paul, excuse me, Dr. Paul, he is of course a renowned ophthalmologist, is wrong about. Because it's been pretty obvious to the rest of us that a massive amount of time, work, money, effort has gone into trying to determine exactly what Dr. Randy believes he already knows. So now, while it's true that the medical and scientific community may not be 100% certain of how COVID originated, but one thing there is virtually unanimous agreement on is where COVID did not come from, and that is a lab in Wuhan funded by the United States. That's where COVID didn't come from. And if I were really interested in how COVID did originate, Rand Paul is the last person in the world whose opinion I would care about. Okay, so let's just jump right in here and trash Senator Paul's bogus opinions one by one. The scientific medical journal Nature Medicine is as good a place to start as any. Let's have a look a little further down the article and see what this says. It is improbable that SARS-CoV-2 emerged through laboratory manipulation of a related SARS-CoV-like coronavirus. Okay, now here is Professor Edward Holmes, one of many, I assume, very notable scientists involved in COVID research and its origins. I want you to note the date here, April 16, 2020. Remember, the debate between Dr. Fauci and Randy was in May of 2021. So what he had to say was this. There is no evidence that SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19 in humans, originated in a laboratory in Wuhan, China. Furthermore, the closest known relative to SARS is named blah, 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 which was kept at a virology lab in Wuhan. He goes on to say there is some unfounded speculation that this was the origin of SARS-CoV-2, however, and then he goes on to explain why it was not. Next, we have a statement from the U.S. intelligence community. And again, note that date there, April 30th, 2020. The point being, why are we still arguing about this? This was several years ago. Reading from the press release, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence today issued the following intelligence community statement. The entire intelligence community has been consistently providing critical support to U.S. policymakers and those responding to the COVID-19 virus, which originated in China. The intelligence community also concurs with the wide scientific consensus that the COVID-19 virus was not man-made or genetically modified. So why are people like Rand Paul still obsessing over this? It's over. It's finished. It wasn't made in a Wuhan lab. Okay, next we have a statement put out by the director of the National Institutes of Health, released just a few days after the hearing in May. Their statement in part reads, however, neither NIH nor NIAID, which is actually run by Fauci, have ever approved any grant that would have supported gain-of-function research on their transmissibility or lethality for humans. So here we have the infamous Dr. Ralph Baric, whose name Randy kept mentioning over and over again. who takes a moment to call Randy out on all his bullshit lies he's been spreading about him in an article for the MIT Technology Review. Here he unequivocally denies being involved in any kind of research involving genetic mutations. He says the Barrick Laboratory has never investigated strategies to create superviruses. Studies focused on the understanding of the cross-species transmission potential of bat coronaviruses, like the blah blah, have been reviewed by the NIH and by the UNC Institutional Biosafety Committee for potential gain-of-function research, and were deemed not to be gain-of-function. Dr. Barrett further states, we never introduced mutations into the blah blah spike to enhance growth in human cells, though the work demonstrated that bat SARS-like viruses were intrinsically poised to emerge in the future. These recombinant clones and viruses were never sent to China because we're not fucking crazy. One of Dr. Randy's many fabrications dealt with the Cambridge Working Group, which was a loosely formed group of researchers headed by a Dr. Mark Lipsitch. Created in 2014, its main focus was addressing the concerns amongst researchers regarding gain-of-function research and its dangers, as well as what they felt was a lack of transparency in these government agencies funding this type of research. They published an article in 2014 in which they do indeed mention a letter they had written and signed regarding these dangers, but they don't appear to mention any specific research labs or organizations, just a sort of a general warning about gain-of-function. And as you can see in here, it was only signed by 18 members of the Cambridge Working Group, far less than the 200 Dr. Randy had claimed signed it. Then shortly after the debate between Dr. Fauci and Rand Paul, Dr. Mark Lipsitch, one of the founding members of the Cambridge Working Group, took to Twitter to call Rand Paul out on his bullshit. Some members of the Cambridge Working Group, they categorically oppose all gain-of-function studies that enhance virulence, transmission, or immune escape. My personal view is that some such studies can be justified on risk-benefit grounds, while those on the flu virus to date cannot. I've been sharply critical of NIH and the Health and Human Services Department on this topic, but I'm dismayed to see a physician and senator fabricating claims about what the Cambridge Working Group has said when questioning Dr. Fauci. What we called for was a moratorium on gain-of-function research until proper risk-benefit calculations can be done. Just as this pandemic was starting, two of us were strongly critical of how NIH and Health and Human Services evaluate GOF proposals, calling for more transparency. I and many others at the Cambridge Working Group support proper investigation of SARS-CoV-2 origins, including the lab-leak hypothesis, and continue to oppose many forms of gain-of-function research. But it is just fabrication to say we have made any statement as a group about work in Wuhan. You cheap-ass, lying sack of shit. So this is the EcoHealth Alliance, whose major source of funding is the National Institutes of Health. And EcoHealth describes itself as a global environmental health nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting wildlife and public health from the emergence of disease. One of the major focuses of EcoHealth Alliance is looking for emerging infectious diseases, which involves collaborating with countries in Southeast Asia, which includes China, and specifically looks for diseases which can cross over from animals to humans, which should go without saying is extraordinarily valuable and important research. And here they explain its significance. The research at EID Search will advance our understanding of the risk of novel viral emergence in a uniquely important region. It will also strengthen in-country research capacity by linking local infectious disease scientists with an international collaborative network that has proven capacity to conduct this work and produce significant findings, which in the end will help prevent individuals from dying needlessly from some wretched fucking form of pneumonia, including certain hypocritical dipshit senators from Kentucky.